Thank you so much, President Sharp, for this opportunity to share with you a little bit about the latest work that the NCAI Tribal Governance and Special Projects Department and its great staff have been doing. As many of you know, this department was born out of a request of tribal leaders to have NCAI develop initiatives and programs that serve tribal leaders, that help them to strengthen tribal governance systems and more fully and effectively exercise tribal nation sovereignty. And it's my honor to share with you today a little bit about one of the projects we've been working on. It you'll hear a lot more about at our annual convention and then in the months and years to come. Next slide, please. So that project is our Building Tribal Economies Toolkit. We have been working for the past few years very closely with tribal leaders, key decision makers, and other key stakeholders across the country to gain a really informed sense about what the needs are. What do tribal nations need in terms of information, models, effective strategies in order to build thriving, resilient, and sustainable tribal economies? And included in this work is an ongoing consultation with about 24 what we call contributors. These are tribal leaders, key decision makers, leading academics from across the country who have dedicated their lives and their professions to working on this very large and very complicated challenge of how do tribal nations build economies that will work for them, not just now, but in the future. And out of that, we have designed and are close to completing the development of this decision-making toolkit. This is modeled largely after the groundbreaking decision-making toolkit that we released back in 2018 that was focused on workforce development. And now we're taking that very successful formula and applying it to tribal economy building. And this toolkit is really a guide for informed strategic decision-making around this challenge of how do you build a thriving, resilient, and most importantly, tribal economy that really is done on tribal terms, that is based on tribal priorities. And importantly, what the toolkit does is it recognizes that there's no one-size-fits-all approach to this challenge. That much as they did traditionally, tribal nations had developed very diverse approaches to economy. And that, importantly, they had this economy thing figured out. They had developed thriving, adaptive economies over the course of millennia. And in those economies, everyone in the community had a valued role to play, where everyone made important contributions, distinct contributions to the economic life and the economic livelihood of the nation. And so one of the fundamental questions that this toolkit poses for tribal leaders, key decision makers, and citizens is, how do you, as a tribal nation, get back to that place? How do you bring forward your traditional tribal economic principles and adapt them to meet the challenges of today and to help you advance the priorities that you've identified for your nation's future? It focuses on 11 what we call strategic considerations. These are key factors that, based on the research, the extensive research that we've done, that tribal nations need to address in order to create and then sustain a thriving tribal economy. It poses some really critical questions around, your current economic approach. Does it truly reflect who we are? And do we truly have ownership in our own economic future? Are the tools that we're using to build an economy and grow an economy, are they our tools or are they someone else's tools that were designed for someone else's end goals? And importantly, we also showcase the efforts of leading tribal nations. And this was quite a challenge for us because there's just so much extraordinary work that's taking place across Indian country in this area of economic development, of economy building. And it was quite a challenge of selecting those 22 tribal nations that we wanted to feature in the toolkit. Next slide, please. So who is this toolkit for? So it's really for everyone in the tribe. And you might think, well, why does everyone need to have a voice in this? Because honestly, that's the only way you're going to be able to develop and implement an approach to economy that enjoys and sustains the will and support of the people. So tribal citizens have a valued role to play. Tribal employees across tribal government have a valued role to play. And importantly, how do all of these stakeholders work together? How do they work together to create a sustainable economic approach that can withstand challenges like COVID, that is resilient, that is focused on growth, that is focused on leveraging the incredible potential that tribal citizens from young to old have in terms of their ideas, their passion, their energy, their effort, their contribution, their skills, their experience to the overall effort of the tribe. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we focus on 11 strategic considerations, and this is a list here. Process is the first one we focus on. This is really focused on fundamentally, how do you go about building an approach to an economy that will work not just today, but over the long haul? And who do you need to involve in that process? And how can you create a structure that gives that process some rhyme or reason so people understand how they can engage with this economy building effort over time? Then there's this fundamental consideration around values. What cultural values do you want to integrate into your economy? What cultural values do you want to advance through your economy? Purpose. What ultimate purpose do you want your economic development activities to serve? Where do you want that economic development activity to take place? Is it just on reservation, off reservation, both? And how do you distinguish between those two? Infrastructure, thinking broadly about infrastructure. It's not just your physical infrastructure, it's all types of infrastructure, your legal infrastructure, your financial infrastructure, et cetera. Your governing institutions. What kind of governing institutions do you need to have in place in order to build the economy that you seek? And for many tribal nations, this requires shedding imposed governing institutions and building or rebuilding ones that make sense for you as a tribal nation. Your people, how do you develop their potential to contribute to economy? Your resources, not just financial resources or natural resources, but things like data resources. What sort of data do you need to make informed strategic decision-making about economy, and informational resources as well about what other tribes are doing? Partnerships, what sort of internal partnerships and external partnerships do you need? Integration, how do you pull all of that stuff together? How do you interconnect things so you can truly recreate a vibrant system of commerce that enables everyone to participate? And then growth, how do you grow your economic approach over time? How do you assess how well it's working? How do you refine it to make it stronger? And how do you really make it sustainable for the long haul? Next slide, please. For each consideration, we feature 4 components. There's a framing the discussion section, which really kind of helps frame the issue for tribal leaders and key decision makers. There's this section called Ask Yourself, where we pose roughly a half dozen questions that we feel tribal nations need to ask of their own current economic approaches, their own governance systems. Then policy recommendations. These are, again, a half dozen policy recommendations that we have seen work across tribal nations across Indian country. And then finally, 2 leading tribal approaches, what we call tribal snapshots. Next slide, please. And here's just an example of one of the tribal snapshots of the 22 that we feature in the toolkit. This is of the Blue Lake Rancheria. Each tribal snapshot features a short 300-word summary of what the tribe's doing, why they're doing it, and most importantly, how they're doing it. It also includes related resources for further learning about what the tribe is doing, and then also the ability for users of the toolkit to connect with that tribe to learn more about their approach. Next slide, please. And with feedback from tribal leaders and others, what we've done is we've added a visualizing economy section here. This is just one example of the infographic style visuals we're going to have in the toolkit to help orient people to the challenges and the solutions around economy building. The one you see here on your screen is called Who Should Be Doing What? So it really focuses in on the roles that various stakeholders within a tribal nation need to play for the nation to be effective and successful in building a vibrant tribal economy. Next slide, please. And in wrapping up, we're just happy to let you know that this is going to be coming later this year, fall of 2021. And we encourage you to learn more about it at NCAI's website, and you'll see much more about this in the coming months as we begin to share out more and more about this toolkit and how it can be a real resource for tribal nations. And with that, I'll turn it over to you, President Sharp. Thank you.